Good morning, good afternoon.
Yeah. So glad that you're here. I've been buzzing with excitement and I've kind of felt that from the group as well since we last spoke. And I've told them right away, I was like, Chris is going to come on our show and he's going to talk to us and any questions you guys have. I have the Exit the Matrix program where I've introduced people to these ideas, these concepts of the tax system, federal tax system being voluntary. And I've told them many times I'm not an expert, but I feel like with your experience and what you do for work now, freeing people from tax slavery, liberating people is
Yeah.
what we do. So I feel like I was telling you when we spoke at first, I feel a lot of confidence based on your experience of facing what everybody's afraid of. And so I guess that's my first question as we get started. Chris from Freedom Law Group, he helps people, he frees people from tax slavery. I want to start with you sharing a bit about your background and how you came to know what you know and share your experience with the group.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for the invitation. I've been excited as well. And hello to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm actually in Colombia at the moment in South America. So we're on Eastern time. So it's the afternoon now. Um, I'm in a hotel, so forgive it's a little different. The little backdrop is a little different.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm in an
Yeah.
Airbnb, so it is what it
Perfect.
is. That's the freedom lifestyle, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for 23 years, I was basically a 1099. I was an independent contractor. I had an LLC and I never paid quarterly taxes. So I just waited until the end of the year, and I wrote a check for whatever my taxes were. And of course, anybody who's ever owned a business, you know the game, right? All your the amusement park, the annual pass for the amusement park is a tax write-off, and all your vacations are actually work trips, and those are write-offs. And I absolutely hated it. I hated tracking my miles and stacking my receipts every time I took a client to lunch or whatever. It's just, and the end of the year, I never wanted to, and we're all the same, right? It's everybody's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. We all hate it. It's disgusting.
It's
And
invasive
so
too.
it is invasive. And it's crazy because they say, you are the one that has to do the math. We're not going to do it for you. And if you mess up, you're going to prison. So,
Hmm.
so that's the environment that we all get to operate in. So I got to the point like my marriage was failing, and I couldn't really focus on anything, and my income dropped one year by hundreds of thousands of dollars in a year, right? And so I was like, I'll pay my taxes next year. Things will get better next year. And things didn't get better the next year, and I couldn't pay my taxes the next year. But I filed. I filed thinking that was the right thing to do. It's like, well, I'll at least file so they don't come after me. And as a little side note, if you file and you don't pay, they come after you like that. If you don't file, you get lost in the sauce, and we can talk more about that later. But so it's so interesting because we all act as if we're experts, but we don't know anything. We don't. It's so funny on TikTok. I make these videos, and these people come on and say, well, you have to sign a W-2 or your employer won't let you work for them. And it's like, it's a W-4, buddy. It's not a W-2. Like all these experts. But anyway, so I just thought for whatever reason, go ahead and file your taxes and pay later. And my tax bill got up to more than $400,000 because I kept pushing it off. And I was making pretty good money. And long story short, I did everything you could possibly do. I tried all the services to reduce your debt and negotiate with the IRS. I wrote stacks of paper to the IRS challenging all the laws, the whole United States definitions and what Congress had to do to circumvent the Constitution. I tried it all, and they ignore everything, of course. No response. Um, as a funny little story, another thing that I did is I said, I've paid you this much money in taxes over the years. You can apply some of that to the debt that I allegedly owe you. And all the rest of it, I want you to return to me in either gold or silver. Like I told the IRS to give me all my tax money back, delivered, insured to my address. I mean, it's really embarrassing now. I look back, I'm like, gosh, I bought in. I mean, literally, I was paying people $500 here, $2,000 here, 3,000. I would give money to anybody who said they had a solution for me, and none of them did. Because here's the bad news. If you file, you owe the money, period, end of story. If you don't file, you have lots of recourse, lots of recourse. But if you file, you're screwed. You owe the money. You owe the money. So anyway, then one woman said, sue the IRS, guaranteed I can help you. Give me this much money and you can sue the IRS. And I did. And my number one reason for suing the IRS was I wanted discovery, right? I wanted to know what they had in their arsenal so that I could build what I have built, right? I wanted to know everything that they knew and everything they were going to show up to court with to annihilate me and cause me to, walk away in shame. So I got the box, this huge box from the Department of Justice, and it was everything. It was everything that I needed to know about what they were going to say and what they were going to do. And then the woman who told me that she would help me, that I paid a lot of money for, she disappeared. I haven't talked to her in like years. Like she literally took my money, said, yeah, go sue them. Here's what you're going to do. And I never heard from her again. I blew her up, texting calls. I could see she was checking my messages, no response. I'm like, just anyway. So I motioned the court to dismiss the case. And they dismissed the case, and I didn't have to pay their attorney fees. And, I took care of my own stuff. So it was this, a decade of dealing with this monstrosity, this monster that will ruin your life. And I've learned, I think, as much as anybody on the planet, and in fact, I think I'm the only person who's ever written a book on the revocation process, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. So it was a long, painful journey, but it reminds me of a woman who has a child. It's 9 months, and a lot of times it's morning sickness, and it's the sacrifice and the changing of the body that never goes back. But then you have this little, you have this life, right? And so that's what has happened for me. Now I have this life and I have this knowledge, and it's been an incredible journey.
So ultimately, that over $400,000 that you allegedly owed, what happened with that?
It's a great question. It just fell off because they have 10 years to collect, and they sent me every nasty letter that you could possibly get. And this is where I was mentally, and call me crazy or whatever.
We've all
But
been
I
called
was like,
crazy in here.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
guys?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. By virtue of what we talk about, we're all crazy.
Mhm.
But no, I in my mind, I was like, take me to prison. I'm not paying, I'm not going to pay. So come get me. And they never came and got me, and they never liened my property. They said they would. In fact, they said they were going to, and nothing ever happened. I mean, I was so scared, but if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. And
Mhm.
I was like, I'm not getting on a payment plan. I'm not going to let these people put these handcuffs on me and tell me how much money I have to pay them every single month for the next, 10 years of my life. So yeah, it just fell off. And I'm one of the fortunate ones. I mean, I know people who got the same letters that I got who didn't pay, and they got locked, either pursued criminally, or they had their house liened, their bank accounts drained. So I consider myself really fortunate in that way. But yeah, most of it is dropped off. I've got a little bit left for 26, 16 will fall off, and then I'm free at last, free at last.
Yeah, because they can only really pursue for a period of 10 years following the amount you allegedly owe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
period of 10 years. So it it's and you filed, so that alleged debt came from you having filed. A lot of people don't understand that if you don't file, then there's no debt attached to your name. And I see news articles every day pop up, I think, because I guess Google News knows that I'm interested in this sort of thing. So it shows me any
Yeah.
article that comes up. But they just had to move people from IT and HR at the IRS into front end positions because they're short on staff still. And it's like you have to read between the lines of these types of articles that talk about the shortage of help. And I can't, have you ever met anybody who works at the IRS personally? Like none of my friends, none of my contacts, I've never met anybody who has. I've worked with attorneys and former accountants who were auditors before, but it's like they don't even have, it's like a toothless paper tiger. They don't have the
Yeah.
staff to actually, or the funding to do what they say they do. So they operate on fear. And what I think a
Totally.
lot of people have completely missed is they believe that we're free, and yet we all pay taxes under threat and duress. And if we are all working for them, 30 to, well, anywhere from 20 to 50% of our incomes go to this
Ah,
federal contribution system, as I now lovingly call it, that we are basically indentured servants. It's the whole thing was invented not
totally.
to pay for the national parks or the roads or the schools or whatever else people tend to cite, right? It's meant to keep us on a leash and collar so that we are dependent. It creates dependency. So does the Social Security system. We're told that we will have freedom in the future if we give them our money now. We won't go to jail if you give us, you won't go to jail if you give us your money. You have freedom now, or you're promised like you'll be okay in the future as long as you just do what we say. And that is threat. That's fear. Nobody's paying because they think the system is fair. Nobody's paying because they actually have the money, or want to give the money because they feel it's going to someplace good. We are all starting to figure out that our money is going to fund war crimes. We're figuring out that our money is going towards paying the interest owed to the Federal Reserve banking cartel, not to actually uh, back to the people. You know, we look at Israel just as one example of that, where education and healthcare are paid for them, whereas over here, we're like so many people are in like a mountain of student loan debt, and we're all growing up to be cogs in the wheel, slaves to the machine. Whereas these other countries that are receiving our funding, like it's just not, and it's okay to say no to that. It's okay to stand up to something that you
Yeah.
know with every fiber of being is wrong. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I was about to say you have to stop because I'm starting to feel violent. I'm like,
Uh,
stop, stop, stop. Yeah, it's maddening. Here's the reality is they never needed our money. The
yeah,
entire tax system and the Federal Reserve System is a money laundering operation that takes the money off the top and gives it to the elite, the people that run the world, these satanic pedophiles that run the entire planet. But in the 1890s, so the federal income tax, the permanent federal income tax system started in 1913. That was the very first permanent federal income tax. They tried it in 1894 for the first time. And 266 days later, it was struck down by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. So then they had to go back to the drawing board and figure it all out. But uh, we we had so much money in the treasury at the end of the 1800s that they had to create special committees to figure out how to spend it. I mean, imagine that, right? Imagine the United States government being so wealthy that they're like, what the hell are we going to do with all this money? Let's create a committee. This committee here, this committee here, this committee here. Let's figure out where we can put this money. Well, the elite, right? They got word of that. They're like, we'll tell you where you're going to put that money. You're going to put that money in our family's bank account, in our trust fund. And the point is we never needed a federal income tax. With tariffs, which is where we were getting the lion's share of our money, because everybody has always wanted to do business with America and with Americans. Everybody, always. And that will always be the case. And that's why President Trump is succeeding so much right now with the tariffs, because everybody wants to do business with us. But so, yeah, so that's what's so maddening is they never needed it. So yes, the whole plan going back 100 years was to launder the money. but we didn't find out about it until Elon Musk and Doge and Somalia, in
Yeah.
Minnesota. I mean, some of us have known about it for a long time, right? But the masses are just being awakened to this. And as an interesting side note, from 2020 until the January of 2025, so for a five-year period of time, during those 5 years, more than 20 million taxpayers stopped filing.
Wow.
I mean, that's huge, right? That's a massive number. That was until January 2025. Well, January 2025 brought Trump's second term, Elon Musk, Doge, the exposure that we're seeing there. And then this thing with Minnesota and California's next on deck. They've gotten billions and billions and billions of dollars for that speed rail that's supposed to go from SoCal to Vegas. Not 1 inch of rail in like a decade or two, however long it's not 1 inch of rail, and they've gotten billions. So yeah, it's disgusting and repugnant, and yeah, I think we're all on the same page on that. But it's that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, and I know you are as well for what you do, um, because there is a way out. There is a way out, and I can't wait to see the numbers this year. Did I lose you guys? Okay, yeah, I can't wait to see the numbers this year. If 20 million Americans stopped over the last 5 years, and now with Doge and all these revelations, what's that going to look like I'm so curious about the 2025 tax year. I mean, it could be another 20 million just this year. You see all this stuff online, people are like, I'm not paying, and F these
Yeah.
people.
It's basically a
So
gang, right? It's a cartel. So how can they come after all of us for one thing? And then what crime have we committed? What crime?
yeah, exactly. Yep. I told you the story, and I'll abbreviate now. If you want me to share more details with your group, I will. But they ended up taking my passport,
Mhm.
and or denying me passport services, because if you have actual debt of more than, I think now the number 60 something $1,000, they'll deny you passport services. Well, I have a girlfriend in Colombia, that's why I'm here. I bought a home here. I've got a life here, and in the US, I go back and forth. And they took my passport, and I couldn't see my girlfriend. I mean, it was devastating. And well, they
Mm.
denied my new passport. The long and short of it is, when Trump was elected just a year ago, I wrote him every 3 days. He was getting a letter from me and everybody in his circle, including at the IRS. And what I told them is, I said, here's my address. And you tell me that I owe you money and I can't get a passport. Just come and arrest me. Like, if I'm a criminal, come, this is my address. My front door is always open. Come get me and put me in prison for the rest of my life. And if I'm not a criminal, give me my passport. And it's a very cool story, and I won't bog everybody down with the details, but I got a passport and I never paid my taxes. So you can love Trump or hate Trump, but Trump gave me a passport. So
Yeah. Yeah, it is a really cool story. And I feel like the universe really does conspire in our favor, especially when our intentions are good. And if our intentions
absolutely.
are to not fund war crimes, when we see through the illusion, and it's really about being free. And I think that's part of the human experience, is to shed everything that's not us and shed all the chains. And that includes the financial chains that have been put upon us.
Absolutely.
Then
Yeah.
there's nothing that's going to stand in our way. That's ultimately what I believe with every fiber of my being. And yeah, like I said before, what crime is there? And there is no law that says you have to file an income tax return. Like, they've just conditioned us to believe that we're going to get in trouble if we don't. So we just do. I mean,
Yeah.
I was excited to file my first one when I was 16. I worked at Winn-Dixie supermarket, you know?
Winn-Dixie. Wow. I grew up with a
Hmm.
Winn-Dixie right around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
I
was
got
excited to file my first tax return, and I was making like $80 a week, and I still had to pay taxes. Like, are you kidding me? Like, and back then
so
I didn't
dumb.
know, because everybody talked about, all the adults, all the people that you're conditioned to believe know more than you in the room, had conditioned me to believe that the only thing that you can't avoid is death and taxes, but it wasn't always like that, right? It wasn't always
No.
like
And
that.
and here's what's crazy. Here's the scam. And you can have me go deeper anywhere you want, but I kind of want to, is it okay if I kind of give an overarching, like
Yeah,
how they did this?
yeah,
So Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4 says there shall be no direct taxes unless it's apportioned according to the census and the population in the census. Well, the federal income tax is a direct tax, right? And then some people will say, well, no, they changed it. The Supreme Court said that it's an indirect tax. Okay, well, if it's an indirect tax, why do we have the 16th Amendment? You don't get it both ways. It's either a direct tax, which required a 16th Amendment, or it's an indirect tax that didn't require the 16th Amendment. So we have this pesky little 16th Amendment. So which is it? And people say the 16th Amendment was just smokescreen to get us all confused to think that now there's a law that requires us to file and pay. This is super important, and I hope everybody gets this. Everybody says the 16th Amendment repealed or trumps or overturned or whatever Article 1. Really? Show me that. What do you mean, show me that? Show me where it says in the 16th Amendment that the 16th Amendment is addressing Article 1 or is repealing Article 1. Well, no, obviously it's addressing Article 1 because it talks about, direct taxes with or without apportionment. Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes with or without apportionment. So that's an obvious reference to Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4. Is it obvious? Because, it's obvious to who? Obvious to you? Like, and show me the language in the 16th Amendment that repealed Article 1. Well, it doesn't have to be in there. Says who? You're making this up as you go along. Where are you getting your information? I'm getting my information from the 16th Amendment. Where are you getting yours? Right? Well, and here's the example. The 18th Amendment says no alcohol, no selling, manufacturing, distributing alcohol, okay? Distributing. The 21st Amendment says you can distribute, manufacture, and sell alcohol. 18th Amendment says no. 21st Amendment says yes, okay? Same thing. Article 1 says no to direct taxes unless they're apportioned. 16th Amendment says yes. Are you seeing the comparison? 18 says no alcohol, 21st says yes alcohol. For Article 1 says no direct taxes unless apportioned. 16th Amendment says with or without apportionment. Here's the difference. The 21st Amendment starts out with this language. The 18th Article of Amendment is hereby repealed. So they had to repeal it before they addressed it.
yeah.
They had to say the 18th Amendment, yes, it's part of the Constitution, but it's hereby repealed. It no longer has power. Who repealed Article 1? It's
Nobody.
never been repealed. It is still active and it still protects we the people in the 50 states of the Union. And so these bloodsuckers figured this out, over 100 years ago. They realized and I didn't know this until I was in my mid-40s. The Constitution is not the law of the land in the territories. The Constitution is not the law of the land in Guam, Puerto Rico, DC, Virgin Islands, Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, and on and on and on. The territories are under the explicit laws of Congress. Congress can make any law that they want to make for the territories. It doesn't require a constitutional amendment. So these vampires, or whatever you call them, they said, hey, let's rename DC the United States. And then let's tell everybody that if you are a United States citizen or resident or or resident alien of the United States, you have to pay taxes. And that's what they did. So all the tax laws are written for DC and DC only. But the way they defined it is so tricky. The definition of the United States for federal income tax purposes only, okay, not for other purposes in the tax code. For federal income tax purposes only, it says that the definition of the United States includes the states and the District of Columbia. So we read that and we go, okay, so the 50 states and the District of Columbia, that's the United States. No, that's not what it says. It says the states. Well, then you go drop down one line, 26 USC 7701. You can go and look it up yourself. Drop down a line, and now you have the definition of state. And the definition of state, it says includes DC. Well, what the hell else does it include? I didn't see anything in there that says the 50 states of the union. I didn't see anything in there that says, California, Texas, Florida, New York, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, people say, and it's so funny because I've had conversations with CPAs and tax attorneys. They'll have a conversation on the phone. They will not go live with me like this. They will not do it. Look, you're so sure. Come with me on TikTok. Let's get in front of a few million people and let's have a conversation. No. Why not? Why not? They won't do it. So, but they say to me, Chris, obviously states means the 50 states. It includes, no, it doesn't. Because see, if you knew what you were talking, you act like you know what you're talking about, but you don't know what you're talking about, because the Supreme Court has ruled that when a statute includes a special definition in the statute, like 26 USC 7701, United States and states, we, the judges, must use that definition, even if that definition differs from the standard ordinary meaning of the term. Furthermore, the court ruled, Supreme Court 9-0 unanimous decision, they ruled that when a statute has a special definition which includes a law, has a special definition which includes something like DC, includes DC, it excludes everything not specifically mentioned in the statute, right? So including the 50 states. Here's the smoking gun. You go to 26 USC, the special subsection for taxation of petroleum. And they have a special definition of the United States in that section, but they don't have a special definition for state in that section. Now, what does that tell you? If they don't have a special definition for state, according to the Supreme Court, we must use the dictionary definition of state, right? Because they don't have a special definition of state. Well, we all know what state means in the dictionary. It means the 50 states, right? It means, if we're for the context of this conversation, state means Texas. It means California, it means New York. Well, they didn't have a special definition in the section for petroleum, which means we have to use the standard ordinary meaning. But they do have a different definition for the United States. And you have to ask yourself, why do they have one definition for the United States for the taxation of petroleum and a totally different definition of the United States for the taxation of federal income, And here's the answer. Because petroleum taxes are excise taxes specifically allowable in the Constitution. And the federal income tax is a direct tax still disallowed by Article 1 of the Constitution. So the definition for United States for taxation of petroleum, check this out, y'all. Here's what it says. The United States is defined as, or to include, the 50 states. There it is in black and white. So the smart people in the room now are going to ask, why does it say the 50 states for taxation of petroleum, definition of the United States, and the states for taxation of income? With the definition of states, see, that's the trick, right? So I'm giving you kind of the steps of the fraud, the things that they had to do to circumvent the Constitution. So they redefined United States and states for taxation purposes, for income taxation. Then what they did is they came out, the law says, there is a law that says that United States citizens and residents have to pay taxes. That there is that law. But then you have to go and define the United States, and it only includes DC. So there is no law. When we say there is no law, that's true. There is no law for us, but there is a law for United States citizens. And you can see now where this starts to get super confusing, because people say, well, Am I not a US citizen? No, hell no, you're not a US citizen. According to the tax code, you're not a US citizen. You don't ever want to be a US citizen. A US citizen is somebody that lives in DC. It's crazy, or the territories. So anyway, so they write the law, right? US citizens have to pay taxes. So we're deceived by that. We're deceived by the language. Then in the 16th Amendment, look at how the 16th Amendment is worded. It says Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes with or without apportionment in the several states. What's the definition of states for federal income tax purposes? Includes DC. The 16th Amendment, it's called the federal income tax because it was designed for federal territories and for federal employees. That's why it's called federal. Like, it's so crazy that none of us ever got that, right? Because we've been deceived by everything. Well, here's the other way that they got us. They realized that in the 1900s, what was happening, everybody was running from their farm to get their first job because the Industrial Revolution was cranking, right? And farms were failing and people were coming to get jobs for the first time ever. Literally, instead of their hand to the soil, their hand was to the boss, right? To the payroll company. Give me my money. So Congress made a law that says all US employers must withhold. That law came a little bit later. All US employers must withhold. So every employer in the country thinks that they're under a legal obligation to withhold, but they're not, because US only includes DC. So that's another way they got us, right? There's layers upon layers upon layers of how they got us. Well, then, like you said, we get our first job. We're 16. We're super excited. It's very rare for a 16-year-old to start a business. They're going to go. It happens, especially nowadays. But back then, it was like you go get your first job at McDonald's, Winn-Dixie, grocery store, whatever. Well, we got our first bit of tax advice from some idiot assistant manager that gave us our first W-4. That's where we got our first tax advice, because we're like, what is this? What do I do? And what did they tell us? Do y'all remember anybody at your job when you were younger in life saying, well, make sure you fill it out right because you don't want to owe? Have y'all ever heard that with your W-4? Make sure you fill it out right because at the end of the year, you don't want to owe. The proper way for a 16-year-old child, to fill out that form, first of all, the proper form is IRS Form 8233 for non-resident aliens. A non-resident alien is, according to the tax code, is any individual that is neither a citizen or a resident of the United States. Well, none of us are citizens or residents of the United States, so that's the proper form for us. Here's the problem. Most employers won't accept it. They don't know what to do with it. They go, what are you talking about? You're a US citizen. You're not a non-resident alien. And then you got to have a fight with your employer. And most people don't want to do that. So for a 16-year-old that doesn't want to fight with their employer, here's the proper thing to have done. The proper thing to have done would have been to fill out a W-4 exempt, because it says in the instructions for the W-4, it says that you can claim exempt if you had no taxable income last year, you didn't meet the threshold last year, and you don't think you're going to meet it this year. 16-year-olds never meet the threshold. They're making like $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour, but they withhold on purpose. Why? So at the end of the year, we get all excited and go, I've got a $500 refund coming. Oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. We get so excited about a refund of our freaking money that they took out of our check and didn't pay us interest on. Well, what's the only way to get that $500?
File and sign.
File and sign. Now
All
they've got
conditioning.
now they've got another slave. Right now, and here's the thing: we say there's no law that requires you to file and pay. That's true, but there's an incredibly powerful nuance. There was no law to require you to file and pay the first time, because before you filed and paid the first time, you were a non-taxpayer. And by the way, there are cases going back 100 years that say the federal appeals court, and this is very, very important because most of us have never heard this in our whole lives. I don't care if you're 80 years old, you probably never heard this. The courts have ruled that non-taxpayers are not subject to internal revenue laws. Who the hell is a non-taxpayer? And
They
by the way,
exist.
they exist. And here's something else that's interesting about a non-resident alien. The only entity or the only kind of person, or we the people, that has no tax liability in the tax code is a non-resident alien. Isn't that strange that these people that are not from the United States have no law requiring them to file and pay a federal income tax? Who are those non-resident aliens? They're us. It's we the people in the 50 states. Yeah. But here's what happens. What if you never file your taxes? And by the way, our videos have gotten millions of views across all the platforms. And we're finding these people that have never filed, because I'd say it all the time. If you've never filed, you'll never hear from the IRS. You'll never hear from the IRS till after you file. And we get calls and emails and texts almost daily from people saying, hey, I saw your video on TikTok. Good for you. You're doing God's work. Keep up the good work, brother. I'm 71. I've never filed. I've never gotten a letter from the IRS in my entire life. You're telling the dang truth. Get another. I'm 86, 87 years old. I've never filed my taxes. I've never heard from the IRS. I did a Zoom call with an entire family in Montana. They homestead. They live off the grid. None of them have social security numbers. None of them have ever filed. It's never heard from the IRS. And I could go on and on and on and on. I was 30 before I filed, and I was already making six figures. Never heard from the IRS. It wasn't until after I filed. So if you never file, and this is how we need to be training our kids, right? Raising our kids. My kids, I've got two that are adults. W-4 exempt, or if they don't take the 8233, they'll never pay $1 in taxes ever, because they'll be W-4 exempt every single year. And they will never file because there's no refund. So why the hell would you file? So they'll remain outside of the IRS database for their entire life. But as you know, and as you've taught, your group, if you have filed, you are now a taxpayer. You have relinquished your constitutional protections. You're now a taxpayer, and you can stop paying and stop filing if you want. But if the IRS pursues you, that's a rough ride for you, right? Which is why the revocation is there. The revocation process was codified into law. And I think this is an important part of the conversation too. And by the way, if I'm going too hard, going too loud, too long.
No, it's great. You're in good company.
So thank you. I appreciate it. So, we all hear that the tax code is voluntary. And sometimes the IRS will say, no, it's not. No, it is too. How can you say it isn't when not I, but people volunteer every year? They voluntarily sign the W-4. They voluntarily sign the 1040. That's all volunteer. Nobody's making you sign your W-4. When I say it's voluntary, that's what I mean. It's voluntary. Nobody forced you to do that. You could have been an entrepreneur and worked as a sole proprietor and never signed a W-4 and never paid $1 in taxes and been free your entire life, which is how things were 200 years ago. Nobody had a job where the government was grabbing. Can you imagine 200 years ago, you work on a farm, and at the end of the day, the boss man is getting ready to give you your money for the day, and some government official steps in and grabs 30%? Literally, they would get shot in the face back then for doing that. Now we're such bitches. I mean, pardon my French, but we're it's like, oh, the government, I'm mad. We don't do anything. Very few of us, you have the spirit, and I know I do, and probably a lot of your followers, we have the spirit of our founding fathers, because we're not afraid to fight. I'm not afraid to lose life, my life, my fortune, my legacy. I'm not afraid. right?
Yeah.
I have kids and grandkids. I have skin in the game. I'm not going to be, pardon my French, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on this. I'm not going to be some bitch whining about being a slave and doing nothing about it. I'm like, F you, you're not getting another dollar from me. And I'm on the digital battlefield fighting like a monster until the IRS is dead and gone. I will fight this fight until. So, sorry, that was not in my script. But the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery. I always thought the 13th Amendment was interesting because it outlawed slavery and involuntary servitude. It's like, when you're young and you learn about it for the first time, it's like, what is, it seems so irrelevant, it's like involuntary, what is that? And I know there were indentured servants and all this, I get that now, but I didn't understand back then. That's a very important part of the Constitution because we all volunteered to, it's crazy because we use the word volunteer. I volunteered to sign my W-4. Yes. I volunteered to sign my 1040. Yes. But it's worse than that. When you sign a W-4, you're not just volunteering. You are, yes, you did volunteer, but you're giving your employer not only permission, you are giving your employer written, explicit instruction to take your freaking money and give it to the corrupt, bloated federal government. By that form, you're giving your employer instruction, voluntary. You told your boss to take your money and give it to the freaking government. You did that, right?
Mm-hmm. So you can't say that the IRS is taking money from you because
Exactly.
they basically conned you into doing it yourself.
Yeah, just imagine if you didn't do that and you worked all week and you've got your check for $2,000, but it's only $1,500. And you go, where's the rest of it? And they go, oh, the government took it. Right? I mean, it's like go to wartime. What are you talking about? The government took it. Well, yeah, that's involuntary servitude. That's what that is. They can't take our money out of our checks without our instruction. We did that, right? So, because we could never, otherwise we'd all class action, we go after the government. We're all involuntary servants. It gets thrown out of court because the judge says, what are you talking about involuntary? You told your freaking boss to take your money and give it to the government. You idiots, get out of my courtroom. You're so stupid. That's what would happen. But here's the challenge. Once you wake up and you realize you screwed yourself, how do you get out of it? There must be a legal remedy to exit the tax system. There was a legal way in. We did it with our signature on a 1040. There must be a remedy. And Congress later, they had to codify your remedy into the tax code. And it's at 26 USC 6013 G4A. Now, in full disclosure, this is a section about non-resident aliens who are married to US citizens and how if you are a non-resident alien who elected to be a taxpayer, because they weren't before, remember, non-resident aliens are not taxpayers. So there's a tell in this. People go, well, it's, Chris, that's not true. And that's not what that code is saying. It's very specific. They're talking about only, and it doesn't say only, okay? It doesn't say includes only. It's just this broad stroke that if you're a non-resident alien who's married to a US citizen, and if you happen to be a non-resident alien who elected into the tax code, you may revoke that election by sending a statement to the Secretary of the Treasury. Well, all your tax professionals and people that have been miseducated by the course class university that they went to, right? Who gives the accreditation for all the universities and the courses in the class? The same federal government that enslaved us. The United States Department of Education is the one that does the accreditation. So, but they say, no, that's just for married people, and it's like, no, you're missing the point. You're seeing up here. I'm seeing, right? I'm seeing down here. What they've admitted to here is that non-resident aliens can elect to be taxpayers. That's what they admitted to. And that's super important And what they also admitted to is that a non-resident alien who is elected to be a taxpayer may revoke that election by sending a statement to the Secretary of the Treasury. And that statement to the Secretary of the Treasury is referred to as a revocation statement or a revocation of election. That's your exit. Now, what's important about a revocation of election is the IRS always will continue, once in the IRS database, always in the IRS database. There's nobody in the IRS that's going to take you out. And they will continue to operate by presumption and plausible deniability. This is how they operate. So even though you do a revocation, sometimes the IRS will challenge you and they'll send you a letter and say, hey, we've determined that your arguments are frivolous. And if your revocation is not written well and you don't have a damn good response to that letter that they send telling you that your arguments in your revocation are frivolous, you're going to wind up back in the tax code. You're going to wind up back as a taxpayer because they will scare you and threaten you, and you've got to know how to navigate those waters. And I have had to, I told you my story earlier about how I was trying to piecemeal all of this together, and I'm going to all these tax freedom seminars and I'm meeting all these gurus, and some of them are amazing. But there are some really big names out there that are teaching you don't file, just stop filing, do a W-4 exempt, stop filing your taxes, and you probably won't get in trouble. But if you do, buy my insurance program, right? And my insurance program is thousands of dollars per year, every single year. And if you ever don't pay, then you lose all your protection, right? All that money that you invested over all those years. So in other words, they're saying, many people, and I'm not being critical, we all have our own business model, right? It's not a bad business model. It's a great business model. It's a smart business model. But in my opinion, it's missing the most important part, which is your legal remedy. There must be an exit for the people who wake up. Otherwise, if there was no remedy, now we can claim involuntary servitude. Now we can make a legitimate complaint to the government because I have awakened. I'm awake now, and I realize that you, shame on you for being so deceptive, and shame on me for being an idiot and trusting the powers that be. But now I know that I volunteered, and I would like to unvolunteer, please. Well, there's nobody at the IRS that knows how to. They're going to say, what are you talking about? You can't unvolunteer. They hid it in this crazy statute in the tax code. And what I've done as a company, and I know you've created a kind of a chat GPT where people can go in and get, by the way, I was quizzing your chat GPT. It's rock solid. You've done an incredible job. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, really, it's really, 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 really good. So, you've created solutions. I've created solutions. And what my frustration was, is I was piecemealing all of this together pre-chat GPT, like before. And Google is compromised and Wikipedia is compromised and chat GPT is compromised unless you train it, right? You have to train it the right way. Otherwise it won't give you the right answer. And by the way, you can ask chat GPT, yes or no only, yes or no answer only. Is the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine safe and effective? Yes. It's just, come on. I mean, it's like, factually, per the government website, the deadliest and most dangerous vaccine in the history of vaccines. More deaths and injuries from that vaccine in the first 5 months than all the other vaccines combined over the past 20 years. Is it safe and effective? Yes. So we can't go to chat. By the way, my next book is called The Source of Truth. And it's super depressing because it's like, what is the source of truth? It ain't Wiki, it ain't Google, it's not ChatGPT, it's not your mom and dad, it's not your grandma and grandpa. I mean, they all have wisdom, right? But where do we go if we want the truth? And people say God. It's like, okay, well, the Christian God, the Muslim God, like, where do we go? Well, the Bible, of course. Well, that's what you say, but there's a lot of people over there that say the Quran. So which is it? Oh, come on, it's the Bible. Jesus is the one true God. And I'm with you. But what about all the, you know what I mean? It's like, where do we go? So, so I was so frustrated because I had to piecemeal my process together. Well, in another life, what I excelled at was systematizing, taking complex ideas and processes and streamlining them and taking out the friction and making something bitter palatable for the masses. That's what I was doing for a long time, as well as seminars and writing books. So that's why I created my company. I mean, I had a legal services company for 23 years. We had hundreds of thousands of clients. We did so much important work. And then I realized how evil the legal system is, and attorneys by extension, even though they're good people, but they're in, an evil system. I sold my business outright. I just sold it. I was done. 23 years I did that. I had all these attorneys working for me and all this infrastructure, and I sold it. And I didn't need this headache, but I would lay in bed at night and think, I know how to build the best mousetrap that's ever existed, for freedom, for American taxpayers. I know how to systematize things. I know how to create courses. I know how to automate. I know how to use AI. I know how to write documents. I have all of these resources. And then I'm like, I don't want the headache. I don't want to be training customer service and that. Couldn't help myself. It was like, I feel called to do this. And I started my company. It was under a different brand several years ago. And we offered lots of courses. Like, you have lots of great courses. I had lots of great courses, but my course on the revocation of election, which included the documents, was 10 times more successful than all my other courses combined. So I listened to the market, and I realized that the people need help. Middle income Americans that are crushed by taxes, debt, credit card, bosses.
Can we talk about, I'm curious, I just like peeked over at the chat and we have a couple of people talking about
Wow.
some of like what AI has told them. I mean, we know what AI is trained to give the narrative that it's supposed to, right? But there's like an interviewee from the Freedom to Fascism documentary, Larkin Rose. Gemini said he spent a year in prison for the 861 argument. Can we talk some about the narratives that are out there that are put there purposely just to dissuade people, and how they never actually talk about the revocation of election process directly? They never have discredited it. To my knowledge,
Absolutely.
they have like
No,
all this list of stuff on there about, oh, this is a frivolous tax argument, frivolous filing, whatever. Well, you can't be a frivolous filer if you don't file. And if
exactly.
you're not a taxpayer anymore because you opted out of the system that you opted into, but they never addressed that one particularly head on.
Absolutely. And so I just saw a question come up. Somebody said, I think it said, have any of your clients been pursued? No, zero, nada. It's never happened. In fact, we have processes for shutting it down. If our clients get a letter, we have a letter that goes back, and it is super aggressive, and we annihilate the IRS, and our clients don't hear from the IRS on that particular tax year. They may on a future year, and then it's rinse and repeat. Send the letter, shut it down. So, and if you don't shut it down, it escalates, and the IRS will pursue, even though you've done a revocation of election. It is so important that you shut it down super fast. So to answer the question, yes, first of all, you have to understand the IRS uses the old slave master tactic. The old slave master tactic is, if you have a slave that's unruly, you bring them into the yard in front of the other slaves and you beat the hell out of them, right? That's how you make good slaves. And you don't have to beat them all. You just have to beat a few. And if you beat a few and you make it public, the rest of them, snap to attention. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. No, ma'am. So they use those same tactics. So we've heard all the violent stories about how they've ruined people. And all of that is intentional. The other thing is this, that they do say, oh, that the United States, that whole definition thing, that's a frivolous tax argument. And that is true if you are a taxpayer, because if you are a taxpayer, there is no argument under God's heaven that will get you out of taxes. Do you get the distinction? If you're a taxpayer, the whole code was built for taxpayers. If you're a taxpayer, you better pay your freaking taxes or you're going to jail. And there is
You
no
agreed to
argument.
that. You agreed to
Yeah,
that. You gave up your Fifth
you
Amendment rights when you sign your tax return. So
absolutely. So that's the thing, is all these cases that have been won against people that make these frivolous tax arguments, they're all taxpayers. All of those people are taxpayers. So that's number one. Number two, our government has been weaponized against us, even if these people were innocent and they had a real case. I mean, I have records of judges saying off the record, but in the courtroom, that the 16th Amendment has no power, but they're not willing to make a ruling because it will upend the entire tax system. And nobody wants to be that judge because they know that in the middle of the night, they're gonna snuff them out. All these judges are petrified. They know that the elite families of the world run the world, and if they upend the tax system, it's over. They'll literally kill their children, kill their families. So people say, well, what about this case? You know, it's like people, they get, you know, like sometimes they get like, you know, you're wrong. And the IRS went after the president of the United States. You know what I mean? Like the FBI went after the president of the United States, who did nothing wrong. They went through his wife's underwear drawer. You think the IRS can't be weaponized against you or against me? So when people say that this judge said this, I don't care what the judge said, but the blanket response is that person was a taxpayer. And if you're a taxpayer, you better pay your taxes. There's no argument. The other thing is this, and you brought up a good point. You can Google this right now. You can Google the truth about frivolous tax arguments. It's a 60-page PDF. It's an official publication of the IRS. And it's their exhaustive list of all the frivolous tax arguments. One of the first ones is it talks about there are people that will tell you that the United States only includes DC, that only people in DC have to pay taxes. This is not true. This is what they say in the thing. This is a frivolous tax argument. All United States citizens must pay taxes. That's true too, right? So they're saying, they're speaking in circles. They're saying that there are companies and individuals out there who will teach you that if you live in the 50 states of the union, that you don't have to pay a federal income tax. This is not true. All United States citizens must file their taxes no matter where they live. That's a true statement. If you are a United States citizen, you must file your taxes no matter where you live. So they speak in circular talk. And if you don't know the definition of US, United States, states, citizen, individual, if you don't know the definition for trade and business, for non-resident alien, for resident, if you don't know the real definition of all those, you're lost in the sauce. You don't even know what you're talking about. So these people, and I'm not being critical of anyone in your comments at all, but I'm being critical of the people in my TikTok feed that,
Yeah, I've
talk
seen
about
them.
signing a W-2 when you don't, it's like, what are you talking about? But where was I going with that?
If you don't know the language, you don't know the words that they're using.
You're talking, these people they're gerbils on a wheel and they don't even know it. It's like, no, I'm out. Not only am I out of the wheel, I'm out of the, whatever you call that cage. I'm out of the cage. I'm out here. Like I'm trying to help you get out of the wheel and out of the cage so that you can see what I see, but you're too busy going United States, Supreme Court, United States. It's like, good Lord.
Defending the prison. Like they are so afraid to leave that they will fight to defend the very prison that they're in because they're so afraid.
Yeah, I say to people all the time, do you always defend your slave masters or are you just doing that for me? Like, is that something you always do?
Or I talked to my CPA and he said that that's not real. Or I looked on the IRS website and it said that's not real. If you ask the prison warden how to get out of prison, you think he's going to tell you?
Exactly. And that's what we do. We hear people outside the prison. They're saying, you can be free. You can be free. And we're like, for real? They're like, yes.
Plato's allegory of the cave.
Yes, you can be free. I'm telling you, you can be free. We're like, well, but I'm in this cage. I know, but you can be free. But I'm in this cage. I know, but you can be free. So what do? The jailer that's standing right outside, we say, hey, do you hear this guy out there? You hear that woman saying you can be, is it true? Can I be free? They go, hell no, you can't be free. Sit down and shut up, you idiot. Pay your freaking taxes. That's the job of a CPA. Mm-hmm. And no critique to them. They were miseducated by a corrupt system, but that's their job. Sit down, shut up, pay your taxes. Yeah. So, and then going back to the question is, yes, in that article that the IRS wrote, as you indicated, Search the article. It's 60 pages. Search it for revocation. It's not in there. Search it for revocation statement. It's not in there. Search it for revocation of election. It's not in there. Search it for 26 USC 6013 G4A. It's not in there. Why are none of those terms in the comprehensive list of frivolous tax arguments? Because it's
Lying
not a
by
frivolous tax
omission.
argument. Exactly. It's
Exactly.
not a frivolous tax argument. And for them to put it in print and to say that it is a frivolous tax argument would be a lie. And the thing is, the IRS, they didn't lie. They tricked us, right? It's called semantic deceit or word art. Some people say, well, that's a lie. It's not a lie to say US citizens have a legal obligation to file taxes. That's not a lie. When you have a special definition of US that only includes DC, it's not a lie, right? It's tricky as hell. It's unscrupulous. It's shameful, but it's what they had to do to circumvent this pesky little Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4. So, and I will say this, I said for years, there's never been one case where someone who did a revocation of election who has been processed by the system, right? Who's been prosecuted. Well, it's my understanding, and I haven't researched this completely, but from surface research, that there was a case in 2004 where somebody went to the U.S. tax court and tried to defend their position with the revocation of election. Here's a very important point for everybody. If you are in U.S. tax court, you've already lost, because tax court is only for taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
And the tax court only has jurisdiction over U.S. taxpayers and U.S. citizens. U.S., DC, 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 DC. So we actually have a process through 3 letters. We don't go to U.S. tax court. We've never had to do this for a revocation of election client because we smashed the IRS. We go on offense, right? We're not afraid to smash them and shut it down. There are lots of people teaching these processes that don't understand that, that follow-up. And by the way, that's all in our resource center. We have a clients only resource center. All the resources they're going to need, they're already there. And we can talk about that more later if you want. But so what happens is the IRS will challenge some of our clients' revocation of election. If you don't shut it down, the letters will escalate. If you don't shut it down, it's too late. Now they say you got to go to tax court. We've never had to do that for one of our clients. But we have another service where people they're 2 weeks away from losing their house. They can hire us. We're not attorneys and we don't go to court. But through a series of 3 letters, we can have the court admit lack of jurisdiction. And upon that admission, we can have that case dismissed on lack of jurisdiction and improper venue. But here's the trick. Here's what everybody does. You find out that the IRS is coming after you, so you want to challenge it, and whether you did a revocation or not. It's like, no, there's no law, and I'm going to fight them, and I'm going to beat them. So what do you have to do to get on the docket? You have to sign the petition, right? So you download it from the U.S. tax court website. You download it, you sign it, and you pay the fee. Guess what? You just gave them jurisdiction. Even if you're protected by the Constitution and you're in the 50 states and you're not a taxpayer, by signing the petition and paying the fee, you just gave U.S. tax court jurisdiction. You admitted on paper with your signature at the penalty of perjury that you are a taxpayer. You can't be a taxpayer and go into a tax court and argue any argument, including the revocation of election, because the revocation of election does not, it means nothing if you're a taxpayer. So here's what's crazy, Caitlin. We were born non-taxpayers, then we file and become taxpayers, then we do the revocation of election and reclaim our non-taxpayer status. And then if the IRS comes after us and we think we're gonna, we're gonna beat the IRS, then we sign the petition and give them the money. We re-entered the code. We re-entered the system, not even knowing. So anyway, these are the things that I've had to learn the super duper hard way. And we've systematized all of the knowledge, put it in videos. And I do a lot of, as you know, like 99% of my videos are free. But I have certain videos that are only for my clients, that are only for people that have completed this process, because they're not relevant to anybody else.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope
thinking of my own revocation election I did in 2022 or 2023. for the 2022 tax year. The only correspondence I received was their acknowledgement where they said that we acknowledge, well, first they said we need another 60 days, which is standard. And then they said, we want to acknowledge that we received your revocation of election. Um, there's no action to be taken on your account this time. But then every year I get the automated letter of like, you haven't filed for this year. And I just resend them the delinquent 10-4, not like reason for explanation. And I say, I'm not a US citizen. When they ask about my incomes, I'm like, what do you mean by income? I ask them a question that they
Oh,
can't
good for
answer.
you.
And I haven't done it this year because my Freedom Coach ChatGPT said uh, that it's just a form, it's just an automated thing, and that unless you receive something more serious, you don't have to acknowledge it every single year. Because I've done it 2 years in a row now, where I just send them another copy of their receipt notice. I saved that notice, and I would give them a receipt or a copy of that and just fax it in every year. But this year I decided not to, so we'll see if anything else comes. But I'm also in pursuit, thanks to, I think it was, I can't remember which member it was. One of our CRN members said that they had written to the IRS and asked for the last 3 years that they'd filed but
Ah,
not
yeah.
or they paid but didn't file. And it was the not filing part, because if you paid and you haven't filed, then that's your money. They have nothing to attach it to, and you can ask for it back legally, and they have to give it to you. So before I did my revocation of election, I had actually paid in $350,000, but it's not attached to a tax return. So any day now, they actually acknowledged, they said, we need another 60 days. So I'm in that window of I could be
Oh,
receiving a big
please.
fat check from
Please let
2022,
me
which I could
know.
really use right now. Yeah, I'll
Wow.
keep you
Please let me
updated.
know if you
The
or
person
any
I'm
of your,
texting.
gosh, that's, yeah, because I didn't know you could do
Our
that.
member
I've
did
heard that.
get without any question, she got back all 3 years that she asked for without any questions. I don't think it added up to 350,000, so it's probably why it's taking mine a little
Wow.
longer, but she got hers back and hasn't had any
Oh,
issues since. So it's, yeah, hearing
I
more and
love
more
those
stories like
victories.
that. It really is about communication and asking questions that they can't answer. And if they ever did tell you that you've had debt, what I've learned is that you just ask them a question, ask them to verify that the debt is yours. Like, where did this come
Right,
from? Can you please
exactly.
verify this? And they can't. They
Yeah.
can't. So, yeah. I think what's happened with the way that we've been semantically deceived is we've been conditioned over time through movies and TV shows and news articles and such to believe that we are actually working for the US government. Like we have essentially become
Oh,
employees of the federal government, which is a corporation. And that's not congruent with why the government existed or was first founded by the people for the people, that they work for us. We elect them, they work for us. We don't work for them. And it's just crazy. Most people are comfortable, maybe not comfortable, but they have so much fear that they would rather continue slaving for that US government without getting anything back in return. Basically, a slap in the face, is an insult to continue
yeah.
paying. So, um, but it's been kind of it's funny to see their attempts to keep it going. It's almost like passive conditioning when you see those articles about like, here's what you need to know about filing your taxes this year. Like just kind of it's almost like those. I forgot what the official term is, but when you see in movies, you see like a brand suggestion, like there's like an Apple computer
Yes.
there, like a
Yeah.
Fanta, like sitting on the counter, and there's
Product
like
shots.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like when you see articles put out like that, or if you see articles about so and so got in trouble for not doing this with their taxes, like they're just trying to scare you. They're just trying to make sure that there's enough of that suggestion out there to dissuade you from doing anything out of alignment with what they want you to do. And basically just continuing that conditioning. And I mean, you don't learn about the system at all when you're in school. You learn how the government's founded, but we don't ask any questions about, well, wait a second, that's not the way it works, because they don't teach you how it works. They don't teach you how it works until you
Yeah.
start becoming a victim of it later in life, when you realize that you've been getting robbed this whole time. So, yeah. So we've got some questions. I want to kind of wrap up this official podcast. And what do you say we go to the audience for questions? Because we've got some questions. Looks like John's asking some questions. So I want to thank everybody who's listening, who's not a member of CRN. You can join CRN. And you do get an exclusive discount with Chris and Freedom Law Group if you are in Conscious Rebels Network as a member. And so we're going to end the official public facing podcast right now. And thanks, Chris, for being here, for being part of the show. We're going to transition over into the exclusive part of our gathering today, which is where our members get to ask Chris questions and we can have a discussion as a group.